we are talking about the movie Blessed Are the Children. This one is directed and co-written by Chris Moore. This was actually made in 2016, but it's being released in 2018 in October by Wild Eye Releasing. Now, apparently, the budget of this movie was literally $1,000. So keep that in mind when we are talking about it. A $1,000 budget movie, but it's a feature-length film. It's not a short film, and the story basically focuses on initially this young girl who is a little bit promiscuous, shall we say, and she gets herself pregnant and then checks into like an abortion clinic, and this clinic is being kind of protested by these kind of pro-life kind of protesters who are dressed in these kind of baby masks, and they later on in the movie seem to basically stalk down this girl and her friends basically to essentially murder them. So that's your basic premise here. So with a £1,000 budget, what is this movie like? Well, with that kind of lower budget, you have to keep your expectations in check. And what you're looking for in a movie like this is more kind of ideas about how maybe these filmmakers can progress, rather than kind of thinking this is going to be a great movie in itself. So, you know, obviously with that kind of lower budget movie, you can expect very kind of low production values. But there are some things here that I feel are worth keeping an eye on, and kind of maybe, look to some potential from the filmmakers here. So we'll start with that. So first of all, the idea of having a slasher movie essentially based on a kind of hot button political issue like abortion is, I think, quite interesting. And obviously you could say they're killer Republicans or whatever, but you know, I actually think it's quite a unique way to kind of maybe approach a kind of slasher film. So I did appreciate the kind of the idea of having a slasher movie with a political message ultimately. And there's no kind of real preaching about what's wrong or right necessarily. It just presents itself that this is the backdrop to which these antagonists are ultimately basing their opinions on. So the second thing I thought was quite good here was the modern way that the young people in this movie, the protagonists, are portrayed. Our kind of central character initially is this girl called Traci, played by Kaley Ball, I think her name is, and she is in a I'll get this wrong, polyamorous relationship. It's one of these newfangled words that you've heard in the last 5 years. So she's basically in this kind of relationship with this guy, and you know, he's sort of seeing other people, and so is she. So it's quite a modern sort of style of, you know, kind of like sexual partnership and everything like that. You don't really see in that many kind of that many movies, to be honest. And even though I think a lot of this movie's dialogue was ad-libbed, they strike me here as kind of fairly kind of real people, real friends. Like the girl kind of Traci, who is our kind of main character in the kind of the first portion of the movie. It kind of switches up as you go along. She actually, she's talking to herself quite a lot in the kind of like to try and rationalise things. And again, it's not something you necessarily see in films. So I quite liked the idea here of maybe showing someone whose shit really isn't all together, and it's kind of, they are real and kind of flawed people. Now, when we get to the actual horror aspects themselves, I actually thought the guys in these kind of baby masks do look quite threatening. And also, it points to some type of organisation of potential killers, which I also thought was quite good at having a bit of a, you know, hints at a kind of a larger kind of picture here. And although the gore is on a very low budget scale, there's one quite uncomfortable tongue-cutting scene, I will say. So what doesn't work here? Well, you know, the big thing here, obviously, this movie is extremely low budget, and as such, it permeates every kind of function of this movie, from obviously the kind of the acting, the kind of the technical side in regards to kind of like lighting, camera work, sound design. There's some really horrible ADR here. So this movie is kind of low budget through and through, so don't be expecting any type of high production values and things like that. I do think the story is fairly well paced. You know, there are things that I don't think the budget cut, you know, it doesn't really matter. So the pacing of the story, I think, is quite well good. It does have some good ideas, and the movie does actually kind of mess with your expectations about maybe who the movie's following, which is a good and a bad thing. Because the one on the positive side, I think it's kind of like it's unpredictable, but on the negative side, it's you don't really have a central protagonist in this movie. So it's kind of we have a character who is essentially a supporting character in the first half of the movie, come into the forefront in the second half. So it's a kind of a little bit of an odd choice, but you feel like, you know, maybe people are underdeveloped. I've also got to say the motivations of our antagonists, these kind of slashers in masks, get lost in the shuffle a little bit, because initially we're led to believe they are kind of a pro-life kind of, you know, slasher group, I guess you would have called it, but then they seem to abandon that and ultimately go for anyone, even someone who was literally up until that point and it was a virgin. So, you know, it doesn't. I think they've had an idea and then just kind of like, well, this will be cool. Higher body count and stuff like that. The gore, the blood effects, the blood is very. I mean, I'm colourblind, so I struggle with these sort of things. But even for me, the blood was far too kind of like a bright orange colour. So that was a little bit of an issue there. And the movie's just kind of, although I felt it's well paced, it just goes in some odd directions and kind of loses kind of focus about what it's actually trying to do, and ultimately kind of ends up being a little bit of a kind of like a jumble here and there. So now, as you watch this movie, I feel if you're watching this as a general audience, you'll just be put off by the kind of the low budget. But I do feel that there is some potential talent behind this movie, because there are some kind of like some interesting ideas on display here. And although the acting is low budget, I do feel like it wasn't as bad as I've seen in a lot of low budget films. And I do feel like the characters on display here seemed like kind of real people to a certain degree. I suspect a lot of that is because it's ad-libbed, but nonetheless, it does come across as, you know, I've seen a lot worse movies for a higher budget than this. So I think when you watch this movie, you're gonna see a low budget film. But what I think, if you look a little deeper, you can see there is potential here, and there are some ideas that are kind of are pretty well done, I've got to say, but maybe just doesn't have the experience and doesn't have the budget at this point to kind of like make it like anything more than just kind of like a low budget kind of slasher thing, which I think is what people will just see when they kind of watch this film. So I do think Chris Moore, obviously one to look out for here. So I do think he has some good ideas. He just needs to sharpen his craft a little bit. And everyone involved here, to be honest with you, I think has some potential. It just kind of maybe we're not quite there yet. So I have to really look at this film as a whole and how kind of like people would view this film. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Now that might seem high for a film that is such a low budget, but I think what you have to remember here is just like this film is kind of, there's some good stuff here just buried in a kind of like sea of low budgetness here. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. And have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.